They called her Laura of the Mists in Bravos, though that name was but one of many she had carried across the narrow sea. She was a slight woman of unassuming stature, with hair that blended into the shadows and eyes that seemed to reflect the many grays of twilight. In the corridors of power, she passed unnoticed. On the seas that brought travelers from Westeros to Essos, she was just another passenger, unremarkable to the sailors who rowed her ashore. If they recalled her at all, it was only because of her curiously calm voice, a voice that lulled them into forgetting her face almost as soon as they'd beheld it. She had come to Bravos as a child, claimed from the slavers of Volantis by a man who wore a kindly smile and never gave his true name. He said he was her father. It was the first lie she learned to accept for the sake of survival. Yet she had grown, and as she grew, she learned the deeper truth behind the illusions. She had been liberated not by a selfless hero, but by a servant of the many-faced god, a quiet disciple from the house of Black and White. When Laura was of the right age and temperament, he brought her to that solemn edifice of marble and ebony, set along the watery steps of the city built on 100 islands. There, in her 12th year, she became a novice among the Faceless men. She discovered quickly that the role of the Faceless men was not merely to grant the gift of death to those in need of it, but to serve something far larger than coin or malice, though coin, indeed, greased many a door. They were the keepers of a sacred vow, older than any crown or throne in Westeros, older even than the freehold of Valyria. Within the long halls of the House of Black and White, Laura learned to shed her identity as one might discard a tattered cloak. She gleaned the subtle arts of disguise, poisoning, infiltration, and patience. Above all, she learned to hold death in her hand like a gift, neither to be hoarded nor feared. Death was not an end, but a beginning, and the servants of the many-faced god were its ambassadors. Yet beyond the official mission of the guild, a mission that had shaped the reputation of the Faceless men for centuries, there were secrets known only to a rare few. When Laura passed her final test, losing a piece of herself forever, she was visited by the kindly man in the quiet hours before dawn. She knelt on the cool stone floor of a windowless chamber, naked except for the watery moonlight that seeped in through a narrow slit in the wall. The kindly man approached her with an expression that shifted like candlelight across a shifting tapestry of faces. He whispered a truth that made her heart pound in her chest. Before there was House Targaryen, there was the dream of fire. We, who have known the darkest corners of the world, have guarded that dream longer than you can fathom. He pressed a carved dragon's tooth into her palm and closed her fingers over it. We are watchers, child. Our duties are many. You do not yet know the full shape of them, but you will. If you serve, you will. He spoke no further of Targaryens that night or the nights that followed. The next day, Laura was sent off on a contract to the Summer Isles, and she spent the year in the sticky heat of Tall Trees Town, ensuring some petty prince's downfall. If the kindly man's words lingered in her mind, she did not speak of them, even to the waif or the younger acolytes who shared her narrow cot and flickering candle. But curiosity was a living thing inside her, a slow, simmering pot that refused to be covered. On her return to Bravos, she cast discreet inquiries here and there, picking up scraps of rumor. The Targaryens had been all but extinguished when Robert Baratheon claimed the Iron Throne. The two children of the Mad King had fled into exile, one across the narrow sea, the other rumored to have drowned in the waters of the realm's perils, or to have been murdered in some remote corner. And yet, there were whispers of babes spirited away at the hour of chaos, of Targaryen cousins from some lesser branch smuggled into Essos, of intermarriages hidden by false heraldry. Laura's inquisitiveness, carefully hidden beneath her mask of dispassion, led her to discover ancient references to a prophecy that predated even the doom of Valyria. A dragon of many faces, reborn to bring balance, some said destruction, to an order grown stagnant. The texts were obscure, the references contradictory, but they all converged on the notion that the Targaryen line, having once wielded dragons and survived the doom, was destined to fulfill some cataclysmic role in the shaping of the world's future. Years passed. Laura became more than a novice. She grew adept at wearing new faces, traveling under names that changed as easily as the direction of the wind. She killed when needed, stole secrets when commanded, and offered the gift of release to those marked for sacrifice. She remained outwardly indifferent, faceless, but inside, that slow, simmering fascination with the Targaryen question never left her. And that was how she found herself on a small skiff in the Lys harbor, amid the stench of rotting fish and the metallic tang of storm-churned seas, waiting for a covert meeting with someone known only as the Keeper of Ashes. She waited for 2 days, living off a pouch of dried figs and a small water skin. The Keeper of Ashes came at dusk, hooded, short of breath, stepping onto her skiff with all the grace of a child fleeing a scolding. He offered a name, but it was likely false. No matter, Laura recognized, in the trembling of his bony fingers, the posture of a man who knew far too many truths that could get him killed. He spoke to her in broken Valyrian. The line endures. Blood of the dragon does not vanish so easily. The seed was scattered, not burned. She offered him a single silver coin, a handshake with her left hand. The sign she was recognized as a disciple of the House of Black and White, and a hushed promise to protect him, so long as the information he gave was worth her trouble. That night, his words flowed like spilt ink onto a dark surface, forming a shape she could almost discern. He told her of an infant whisked from Dragonstone during the final hours of the siege, of a pair of eggs that had vanished from the Red Keep's catacombs generations past, of a caretaker who believed the lives of Targaryen bastards were safer if the world presumed them dead. Most pointedly, he told her that the Faceless men themselves had accepted gold from certain Westerosi hands to end the Targaryen line. Yet, curiously, they had always found a reason to delay, to fail, or to act in ways that left the rumor of Targaryens lingering like a phoenix rising from ash. It was the first time Laura heard the rumor that her own order had, for centuries, played a double game, a quiet weaving of illusions. Perhaps, she reflected, that was the real source of the Targaryen mystique. The invisible hand of the House of Black and White ensuring that the last embers of the dragon blood never went completely cold. Yet, for what purpose? She pressed the Keeper of Ashes for answers, but he had little more than half-remembered truths, gleaned from the diaries of a Pentoshi magister who had died in suspicious circumstances. The man's breath rattled in his chest, as though consumed by guilt or fear. Laura listened carefully, gave him a vial of poppy extract for his pains, and sent him on his way. She suspected she would never see him again. The next day, she left Lys, setting sail aboard a merchant cog heading toward Old Volantis. There was a lead in that ancient city, a rumor of a lost Targaryen scion hidden by a wealthy benefactor. She did not dare speak of her mission to the other Faceless men, not until she had something solid in her hands. Yet her mentor, the kindly man, had said once that all roads eventually led to Bravos, because in Bravos one could learn truths hidden from the rest of the world. So Laura thought, perhaps my order already knows all that I seek. Perhaps I am just a pawn in a game older than I. The notion filled her with a sense of wonder and dread, and still she pressed on. Volantis was older than any city in Westeros. Ancient walls, black with centuries of soot, ringed the heart of the old city. The famed Long Bridge spanned the Rhoyne with arches wide enough to accommodate entire bazaars of fishwives, cut purses, sellswords, and slave merchants. Laura disembarked in the shadow of that bridge, then moved through the city with sure-footed ease, ignoring the hawkers who grabbed at passers-by, the perfumed slavers who showed off their living wares, the pink-lipped pillow-house proprietors who leered from open doorways. She was a shadow slipping through the throng. On her second night, she found herself in a dilapidated tavern near the eastern wharves, where the smell of spiced wine did little to mask the rancid odor of cheap oil and rotted hulls. She waited for a contact, a fellow from Pentos who supposedly knew more about the hidden Targaryens. Instead, she was met by a silent, veiled woman who slid onto the bench across from her. At first, Laura thought this woman might be another of the Faceless men, someone set to test her. But as soon as the woman spoke, in a voice like flint scraping iron, Laura knew better. "They say you're searching," the veiled woman said. "A dangerous quest, to chase a vanished line of kings." Laura's lips curved slightly. "I chase coin, nothing more. Lies. But I will not fault you for them," the veiled woman said. She flicked her eyes about, scanning the tavern. The nearby patrons paid them little mind, engrossed as they were in their drink and their dice. In a land of so many secrets, two quiet figures in a back corner were hardly worth a second glance. What you seek is real. The lines of the dragon are scattered as seeds in the wind, but some seeds fall into fertile soil. Some sprout. In the east, there is talk of a queen who walks through fire. To the west, a rumor that Rhaegar's son was never truly murdered as an infant, but smuggled away. And you know all this how? The woman paused. Her veil shifted with her breath. Because I was once a handmaiden to a princess of the 7 kingdoms, before the war toppled the world we knew. Laura studied her eyes, trying to read truth in them. A handmaiden in Volantis? The woman's laugh was bitter. War flings people across oceans like driftwood. The last princess I served is long dead, but her child was not. She had the blood of the dragon, and that blood runs strong. When I was cast adrift, I found refuge among those who believed in the prince that was promised. I do not know the shape of his face or the color of his eyes, but they say the line of Aegon the Conqueror must endure until the final battle. The darkness is coming, and only those bound by old blood and older magic can stand against it. Attention coiled in Laura's chest. The prophecy again. Azor Ahai reborn, the prince that was promised, the harbinger of light in the darkest hour. She had heard the words repeated in bravos, half laughed at by cynics in the guild, half whispered by those who believed in the old legends. So they say, she answered carefully, but prophecies are dangerous. People twist them, die for them, kill for them. The faceless men are no exception, the veiled woman said. You kill for coin, so they say. Yet I believe your order is bound by something older. You are the Watchers, are you not? The keepers of equilibrium. Laura thought of the kindly man's cryptic words. Her mind strayed to that carved dragon's tooth, still tucked away in a hidden pocket in her belt. I am a servant of the many-faced god. The veiled woman tilted her head, as though in pity. Yes, a servant of death, but death chooses sides in the war to come. Or perhaps your superiors do. Consider, why have so many attempts on the lives of Targaryens failed? Why did the House of Black and White demand gold from those who wanted the Targaryens snuffed out, only to abort the kill at the final moment? You think it was mere chance? Laura said nothing, but the question rang in her mind like a temple bell. It was rumored that after the sack of King's Landing, a wealthy lord had tried to hire the Faceless men to kill the last Targaryens across the sea. Viserys and Daenerys, mere children wandering from Braavosi Bank to Pentoshi Palace. The sum offered was reportedly extravagant beyond measure. And yet, the contract had never been fulfilled. That bit of history was well known among those who told stories of the Faceless men's exploits. There were many theories. Some said the last Targaryens were more trouble than they were worth. Others claimed the House of Black and White demanded payment beyond coin, and the lord who offered the contract wouldn't pay it. But the veiled woman's implication was far more insidious, that the order had never intended to kill the Targaryens in the first place. Why are you telling me this? Laura finally asked. Because the war is coming. The final war. The living and the dead. The cold darkness and the flames of prophecy. We each have our part to play. If you did not suspect already that your order was more than assassins in the dark, you would not be searching for me or others like me. In the West, the realm calls it a song of ice and fire. I call it doom. And you, child of the many-faced god, are caught between your sworn duties and the deeper purpose your masters hide. Some hours later, Laura slipped out of the tavern alone. The veiled woman had disappeared into the labyrinth of Volantis, leaving behind only riddles. Laura had gleaned a few new fragments of rumor. A boy in the Stepstones claiming Targaryen heritage, supported by Sel's words from Tyrosh. A hidden daughter in Lys, the offspring of one of the Mad King's cousins. The woman spoke, too, of dragon dreams, visions that haunted Targaryen lines. Perhaps, Laura thought, the presence of such dreams in these scattered bloodlines was the reason the House of Black and White cared. Dreams could shape the world if enough believed. She felt eyes upon her as she made her way back to her cramped lodgings. Could it be her own guild shadowing her? Or the agents of some other power? Only the black silhouette of the long bridge loomed overhead, haloed by the lights of countless torches. She took a winding route through narrow alleys, stepping over shallow puddles that reflected the half-moon overhead. Uncertainty gnawed at her. The faith of the many-faced god taught her to embrace the gift of death, not to fear it, not to love it. But was it possible that the House of Black and White secretly shielded a lineage that might bring war on a massive scale? Why? Before she could unravel these questions, she ran headlong into a pair of men who emerged from the shadows, brandishing daggers. She recognized them as Sellswords by their posture and the casual cruelty in their eyes. Without a word, she reached for a small needle-like blade concealed in her sleeve. 2 heartbeats later, one man lay gasping, a new hole in his throat. The other was on his knees, clutching at severed tendons in his arm. Laura pressed the tip of her blade to his cheek, breathing slowly. "Who sent you?" she asked, voice calm as falling rain. The man's eyes flickered with terror. Blood pulsed from the wound in his arm. No one you would know. We were told. Silver for your death, that's all." "By whom?" He tried to speak, coughed, spat out red. "A tall man from Bravos. He wore a gray cloak, hooded, spoke with a heavy accent." He gasped. She recognized the signs of a man at death's threshold. The next question lodged itself in her throat. She might glean more from him if she gave him some aid, but a voice inside her told her to let him die. Faceless men left no loose ends. She pressed harder until she saw the life drain from his eyes. Then, with the swiftness of a ghost, she vanished into the night. A tall man from Bravos with a heavy accent. Could be any number of water dancers, merchants, or swords for hire. Or it could be one of her own, following orders to ensure she did not stray too far from her tasks. She remembered the kindly man's promise. "You do not yet know the full shape of your duties, but you will." Perhaps her masters wanted to test her resolve, or perhaps they merely wished to see how deep her curiosity ran. Either way, Laura felt the noose of fate tightening around her. She knew she was treading dangerous ground. Rather than continue her inquiries in Volantis, she decided to slip away at dawn. She spent what little coin she had on passage aboard a battered ship bound for the coast near Slaver's Bay. She told herself she would circle back to Bravos, ask direct questions of the kindly man. She was no rebellious child. She was an assassin well-versed in secrecy, in discipline. Yet some part of her needed to confirm if the rumors were true, that among the tasks the Faceless men performed was the safeguarding, secretly, subtly, of Targaryen lineage for the sake of a prophecy that might save or shatter the world. Weeks passed in a blur of brine and bored sailors. By day, Laura kept to herself, letting the scorching sun bake her skin until she resembled any other deckhand. By night, she listened to the hushed talk among the crew. She gleaned that they feared the Dothraki hordes rumored to be uniting behind some foreign queen, Daenerys Targaryen, the silver-haired breaker of chains. Some spoke of her with awe, describing how she had walked into flames and emerged unscathed, clutching living dragons. Others scoffed, calling her a pretender. But the seeds of rumor were enough to bring tension to every man's voice. Dragons had returned to the world, and though most considered them small and inconsequential, the idea alone was enough to stoke wonder. Laura's heart pounded at these accounts. If the rumors were true, then at least one Targaryen had indeed survived, and not just survived, but thrived, reawakening the dragons that had long been believed extinct. Was this not the very thing her order might have foreseen or even orchestrated? If the House of Black and White was interfering to keep the Targaryen bloodline alive, then Daenerys Stormborn's triumph in the Far East was a sign that those hidden maneuvers were bearing fruit. She could almost hear the kindly man's calm voice. The dream of fire cannot be extinguished by mortal hands. Upon reaching Slaver's Bay, Laura disembarked in a city consumed by chaos. She smelled blood on the wind, saw slaves freed, their masters butchered, and the uneasy shifts of power as new administrators took over. She heard that Daenerys Targaryen had made her seat in Meereen, seeking to rule as a queen and break the wheel of bondage. Laura did not approach the city's Great Pyramid. She was no fool. Even the best illusions would be tested by the Targaryen queen's advisors and unsullied guards. Instead, Laura slipped among the refugees, listening to whispers, eyes ever watchful for signs of her own guild. In a squalid district of makeshift tents, Laura encountered a group of stragglers, former slaves from Astapor and Yunkai. They spoke of the queen as if she were a goddess. But one old man, bent and scarred, peered into Laura's face with penetrating eyes. He recognized her as one of the Faceless men, though she had not revealed so much as a flicker of her identity. Somehow, he saw the truth behind her exterior. Motioning for her to follow, he took her to a tattered pavilion at the edge of the encampment. There, hidden in a trunk, he showed her a small tapestry bearing the three-headed dragon sigil of House Targaryen. Beneath the dragon, a phrase in Valyrian read, "The dreamers are not dead." He traced the embroidered letters with a trembling finger. "I was a steward in House Targaryen before the sack of King's Landing. I fled. I took this tapestry as a memento of a world burned away. But the dream is alive again, thanks to Daenerys Stormborn. And not just in her. The blood endures in others, though scattered and hidden. I heard rumors that the Faceless men have turned away those who would pay for the last dragon's heads. I do not know why, but if you are who I believe, then perhaps you can answer that riddle for me. Why do your kind preserve the dragon's blood?" Laura swallowed. "I don't know," she answered truthfully. "I came searching for that very reason." The old man gave a low chuckle. "It seems we are both seekers in a world of illusions. Take the tapestry. If nothing else, it may remind you that sometimes life is forged in flame, not ended by it." She accepted his gift with something akin to reverence. A swirl of questions churned in her mind. She could not linger in Meereen lest she draw too much attention. So she left the next day, traveling north along the trade routes. She disguised herself as a freedwoman, forging papers that claimed she was heading to the Dothraki Sea in search of lost family. In reality, she planned to loop back west, across the poisoned deserts and the ghost-haunted ruins that dotted Essos, eventually returning to Braavos. The journey was long and perilous. She encountered roving bands of brigands and once narrowly escaped capture by a group of former slavers seeking to rebuild their lost fortunes. She bartered a stolen ruby ring for safe passage through a narrow pass in the Valyrian peninsula, all the while haunted by the knowledge that the fires of the old freehold had once ravaged this land. Now it was naught but haunted, decaying grandeur. She wondered if the prophecy the Targaryens carried was tied to the doom that had consumed Valyria centuries ago. Perhaps the same cataclysmic power slumbered still, waiting for a time to be unleashed. At last, she reached Braavos by ship. The Titan loomed tall over the harbor, its eyes blazing with torchlight, though the hours were near dawn. Laura disembarked quietly and made her way through the winding canals and footbridges to the House of Black and White. She had changed faces several times on her journey, but this time she arrived as herself, or the self she believed to be Laura of the Mists, the face she had worn in her earliest days as an acolyte. The silent servants of the temple admitted her without question. She found the kindly man waiting by a small brazier in a hall lined with statues of forgotten gods. He wore a face that was kindly, yes, but also oddly stern. Laura knelt, bowing her head in respect. "Child," he said, "you have been away a long time. Your tasks were not so extensive that you should be gone many moons. Explain." Laura took a breath. "I pursued rumors, Sensi. Rumors about the Targaryen bloodline, about prophecies. I sought knowledge for the good of the many-faced god." He made no move to scold her, merely studied her with an inscrutable gaze. Then he waved her closer to the brazier. The coals glowed faintly, and the warmth on Laura's cheeks felt almost intimate. "What have you learned?" Her pulse quickened. "That there are Targaryens in hiding, scattered across Essos, perhaps in Westeros as well. Some claim your order has accepted gold to kill them, yet never fulfilled those contracts. Others claim you have quietly protected them. I cannot see why an order devoted to death would keep anyone alive, least of all a line of would-be kings." A flicker in the kindly man's eyes suggested neither anger nor surprise, but a quiet acceptance. There are many illusions in this world. The illusions of birth and station, the illusions of might and power. But illusions can be used to shape truth as well. When the freehold of Valyria fell, it was said that the Faceless men played a role. We are rumored to have unleashed the doom, though that is but rumor. Perhaps we had a hand in it, perhaps not. Yet from that doom rose the Targaryens, fleeing to Dragonstone. They were but a minor family among the Dragon Lords at the time, yet they survived when so many did not. He paused, letting that sink in. We serve death, child, but not mindlessly. The many-faced God is all gods of death, from the great shepherd to the stranger to the black goat and more. Death brings balance when life grows monstrous. But we are also keepers of an older vow, older than the house of black and white itself. We are watchers of the dream, though only a few of us know the extent of it. The dream was a prophecy that emerged from the blood of the first Valyrian seers, foretelling a great darkness that would sweep across the world. The only hope to halt that darkness lay with those who carried the blood of the dragon and who possessed the gift of forging new fire from old embers. Laura's heartbeat thundered in her ears. "So you preserve the Targaryens for this reason?" He smiled softly. "You say preserve. We say allow destiny its rightful path. If the Targaryens fail in their role, then so be it. We will give them to the many-faced God. But if they stand a chance of fulfilling the dream, of bringing the world's last hope against the night, who are we to snuff out the spark before it can burn?" Laura lowered her gaze, absorbing the enormity of it. "Then those who tried to pay us to kill the Targaryens were not wholly denied. We took their gold in many cases. A dead Targaryen here, a stillborn scion there. There are lines among that house that were indeed ended by our hand. For the prophecy speaks of a chosen champion, not an entire family. Some lines were unhealthy or corrupted. Others threatened to bring the wrath of the world upon the survivors who truly mattered. There is an art to culling the branches so that the tree may grow stronger. And now, Daenerys Targaryen has dragons once more," Laura said softly. "She frees slaves, conquers cities. She may be the one or she may not be. The prophecy does not say it must be a woman or a man, only that the blood of the dragon must face the darkness. Yet she is not the only Targaryen who lives. Even now we hear of pretenders, claimants, scattered seeds. Our role is to watch, to safeguard those we deem essential, and to cull those who threaten the fulfillment of the dream." Laura recalled the words of the veiled woman and the old steward in Meereen. "And you are certain the dream is true, Sensi?" He exhaled, a sound that might have been a sigh. "Certainty is for fools. We hold no illusions that prophecy can be manipulated or might fail. All we know is that in times past, each time the darkness threatened, be it the long night or the forging of the first Dragon Lords, someone in possession of the old blood rose to meet it. The Targaryens are the last vestige of that lineage. They must be kept alive until their role is completed. That is our vow. That is the vow that transcends coin, the vow that ties us to the destinies of kings." His expression hardened. "Now, child, I must ask, how far did you pry, and whom did you speak with? There are those among our ranks who question the wisdom of letting novices chase this knowledge. We do not want the game revealed to outsiders. You have done well to return. But if you have compromised our secrets, the penalty would be final." Laura felt a chill, yet she met his gaze evenly. "I took pains to speak only to those who already suspected. I revealed no ties to the house of black and white, save what they deduced. If any come seeking more, they will find only confusion. I have killed more than once to keep the illusions intact." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. There is another task for you if you wish to prove your loyalty. In Westeros, rumors abound of new claimants to the Targaryen name. I would have you go there, to the lands of House Martell in Dorne, where it is said a young woman rumored to be of Targaryen descent hides among the hills, shielded by loyalists. We have received a contract for her death from a powerful lord. Accept it and travel to Dorne. Find her. Decide if the dream needs her alive, or if the world is better served by her demise. Do you understand?" Every muscle in Laura's body felt taut. This was the test. "I will do what must be done," she answered. "Then go. Prepare yourself. A ship awaits in the Purple Harbor. Sail under the name Selagadin, a merchant's widow from Tyrosh. The details are arranged." With that, he gave her a small coin embossed with a Bravosi sigil, indicating her new identity. Laura bowed her head and retreated. As she passed through the dim corridors, she felt a new weight on her shoulders. She had glimpsed a secret larger than any she'd ever imagined. The Faceless men did not simply kill for hire. They manipulated the course of prophecy itself, forging and destroying Targaryen branches like a gardener pruning a tree. The implications made her dizzy. Was she to decide who lived and who died in service of a prophecy that might or might not come true? She spent the night in silent contemplation, a vigil broken only by the flickering candles of the House of Black and White. She was assigned a small pallet in a chamber she had once shared with other novices. Now she was alone. In the stillness, she clutched the dragon's tooth charm the kindly man had given her so long ago. Thoughts spun like webs in her mind. The prophecy of the prince that was promised, the threat of an otherworldly darkness, the knowledge that her entire guild walked a razor's edge of moral paradox. She recalled the old man's tapestry, the veiled woman's rasping voice, the pleas of slaves who saw Daenerys Stormborn as a liberator, all of them pawns in a cosmic game. Or perhaps each was a piece with agency, forging destiny in defiance of the illusions. At dawn's first light, she set out. Her identity was no longer Laura. She wore the face of Selagadin, a plump widow with streaks of gray in her hair, simple clothes, and a polite, unassuming smile. The transformation was nearly perfect. She carried her old self in her heart, locked away behind the discipline of the Faceless men. The illusions would hold. The ship she boarded was called the Violet Lady. Its captain was a tall, bearded Bravosi who glanced only once at her forged documents and offered no further questions. They sailed out of the city's waterways, past the Titan, into the open sea. The wind smelled of salt and distant storms. The journey to Dorne would be lengthy, requiring them to skirt the coast of the narrow sea, perhaps stopping in Pentos or Lys if trade demanded. Selagadin would be a quiet passenger, paying her way discreetly. Meanwhile, behind Sela's placid gaze, Laura would plot her approach. Dorne was a land of deserts, rocky crags, and proud traditions. House Martell had once allied with the Targaryens through marriage, forging a bond that lingered in the Dornish soul. If any corner of Westeros still revered the dragon's blood openly, it was Dorne. The rumored Targaryen scion might find refuge in hidden watchtowers or among traveling caravans. Laura's mission was to find her, evaluate her significance to the prophecy, and either spare her life or end it. The contract from the House of Black and White demanded that a Targaryen claimant be silenced for the right sum, but the deeper vow might demand the opposite. Laura would have to judge carefully. Her own beliefs, did she even have them anymore? Clashed with her sense of duty. Seas were kind in the first weeks, though storms lurked on the horizon. On the open deck, Selagadin was inconspicuous, her hands busy crocheting or her eyes closed as though lost in grief for her dead husband. When the sailors teased her or offered crude jests, she responded with soft smiles and mild remarks. None saw the dagger hidden in a fold of her cloak, the trained reflexes that would strike lethal in a heartbeat if needed. Near Lys, they anchored for fresh provisions. Memories of her earlier sojourn in that city pricked at Laura's conscience. She wondered if the Keeper of Ashes still lived, or if he had run afoul of more dangerous players. She resisted the temptation to search him out. Her mission lay ahead. The ship resumed its journey, crossing paths with pirates who glared from a distance but did not attack. Then came the crossing to Westeros, a shift in the air that felt colder than she remembered. Winter was on the wind, or so the sailors muttered, an unnatural chill that seemed to seep through clothes and flesh. Even in Dorne, Laura heard, the nights were growing longer, and the starlight sharper. It was as though the world itself stood on the brink of a new epoch. Old superstitions about the long night returned in hushed talk. They arrived at the port of Sunspear. The palace of House Martell rose like a spear thrusting into the sky, a cluster of ochre walls and towers in the shimmering heat. Sela Gadden disembarked and found modest lodging near the harbor. Once settled, Laura quickly picked up on the local gossip. Whispers circulated among the tavern-goers and dockworkers. A girl with silver-gold hair seen traveling under guard. A name she denies, but some say is Targaryen. She's not the Dragon Queen in the east, but another, a cousin or a half-sister. No one is sure. The rumors were contradictory, but they all pointed to the deserts west of Sunspear, near the foothills of the Red Mountains. One name recurred: Lady Kalira, a mysterious noblewoman who never removed her veil in public and rarely ventured from her small keep. Some said she was an exiled Tyrell, others that she was a Lannister bastard. But the hush in their voices suggested something more significant. Laura set out at dawn, dressed in traveling clothes that hid her daggers and poisons. She wore a wide-brimmed hat to shield against the Dornish sun. She rented a sandsteed from a stable that catered to travelers with means, paying with Tyroshi coins. The stablemaster eyed her carefully, but accepted her coin without question. She was, after all, just another merchant's widow searching for a quiet place to trade spices or perhaps craft goods. The roads were dusty, lined with cacti and scrub brush. She passed clusters of date palms near the rare oases. Dornish knights in light armor occasionally patrolled, but they paid her little mind. Locals recognized her as a foreigner, but Dorne was used to foreigners, especially those who came to see the grandeur of Sunspear or the water gardens. Few ventured deeper into the scorching deserts, which made Laura's journey somewhat conspicuous. She took pains to avoid direct questions, inventing a story of a promised orchard estate she hoped to purchase for growing rare Tyroshi melons. People laughed but let her be. In time, she reached a region known as the Vale of Scorpions, so called for the venomous creatures said to dwell there. Tucked among the red rocks, beyond a narrow canyon, lay a small fortress. Locals called it the Weeping Tower, though it looked no more impressive than a keep with a single turret. High walls of sun-bleached stone rose around it, and in the courtyard stood a lonely lemon tree, its fruit rumored to be sour enough to curl the tongue. According to travelers' tales, Lady Kalira resided within. At twilight, Laura found an outcropping overlooking the keep. She tethered her sandsteed under a small overhang, giving the animal water. Then she slipped closer to the walls, silent as a wraith. She spied on the courtyard for hours. A handful of guards patrolled, but they seemed lax. In the tower's upper windows, she saw flickers of candlelight. Once, she glimpsed the silhouette of a figure with hair that seemed pale in the moonlight. Her heart tightened. Could that be the rumored Targaryen scion? If so, Laura needed to determine if she mattered. Was this woman a threat to Daenerys, or a potential ally in the coming struggle? Did the prophecy require her survival? The contract demanded her death. The vow, however, required careful judgment. By the time the moon was high, Laura moved into action. She scaled the tower using a rope with a small grappling hook, careful to make no noise. She had done this 100 times in Bravos and beyond. Reaching a window ledge, she pressed her back to the cool stone and peered inside. The chamber was modest. A bed, a carved chest, a single mirror. By the dim glow of a brazier, she saw a young woman kneeling in prayer. Her hair, indeed, was silver gold. Her features possessed that signature Targaryen cast. High cheekbones, lilac eyes. She was no older than 20. Laura's breath caught. She listened. The young woman's prayers were in a low voice, words half lost to the rustle of a breeze. But Laura caught fragments. Blessed Mother of Dragons, guide me. Let me find the path to my kin. Let me not fail. She sounded desperate. The letters on the floor in front of her bore a broken seal. One Laura could not make out from the angle. The woman wept softly, heartbreak laid bare in the solitude of midnight. Laura nearly withdrew, uneasy at invading such private sorrow. But she had a mission. Steeling herself, she slipped inside, landing noiselessly on the stone floor. The woman froze, sensing movement. She whirled around, eyes wide. Before she could scream, Laura placed a finger to her lips in a gesture of silence. I mean you no harm. Yet, Laura whispered, her voice carefully pitched. "Who are you?" The woman's gaze flicked from Laura's hood to the dagger glinting at her waist. "They call me Lady Kalira," she managed to say, her voice quivering. "But I suppose you already know that." Laura stood still, letting the tension build. "Some say you have Targaryen blood." A flicker of defiance rose in the woman's eyes. "Is that why you've come? To kill me? Have the Lannisters sent you? Or the Baratheons?" "No, I come from another place. I seek the truth. If you truly carry the blood of the dragon, why do you hide in this lonely tower?" Kalira's shoulders slumped. She sank onto the edge of her bed, too frightened or exhausted to maintain bravado. "Because I am not the queen. I am not the savior. My father was, or claimed to be, a bastard born of Rhaegar Targaryen's line. He fed me stories of our heritage, swore we had the dragon's blood. But that was before Robert's men cut him down. I fled as a child, wandering from one false patron to another, always in hiding. The lords of Westeros have no tolerance for Targaryens or even bastards who pretend to that name. And now word comes of Daenerys with her dragons in the east. Should I go to her? Would she see me as a threat or welcome me as kin? I do not know, so I remain. I have no illusions of the throne, but men fear what the Targaryen name represents." Listening to her, Laura felt a stirring of pity. This woman was frightened, alone, yet the contract demanded her death. And the vow demanded Laura weigh her potential role in the prophecy. If this woman posed no threat or had no part to play, the guild might see her as an unnecessary risk. The dream was with Daenerys. Shouldn't all other claimants be removed to keep the prophecy focused? But Laura's instincts hesitated. "Let me see your eyes," she said. Kalira lifted her face. In the candlelight, her irises glowed a faint hue of lavender. Targaryen eyes indeed, or close enough to it. "You say your father claimed to be a bastard of Rhaegar. Did he possess any proof?" Kalira laughed softly, a bitter sound. "A signet ring, old letters, some half-finished ballad. All were lost when he died. Our supposed supporters took what they wanted, burned the rest. I have only my name and my face, which men say is too Valyrian by half. It's enough to make them suspicious. Not enough to make me safe." Laura studied her a moment lunge. Then approached. Kalira tensed, her eyes flicking to the dagger. Laura gently took her wrist and pressed 2 fingers to the vein there, feeling the quick pulse of life. "You have a choice," Laura murmured, speaking half to herself. "If you remain here, one day someone else will come to end you. You know that. If you flee to Daenerys, perhaps you will find acceptance, or perhaps you will be cast aside or killed. Are you strong enough to carve your destiny, or will you allow others to shape it for you?" Tears welled in Kalira's eyes. "I don't know. I live in fear each day. I've never seen a dragon. I only know the stories. Does the prophecy say anything about me?" Laura felt a pang. She remembered what the kindly man had said, culling some branches, letting others grow. In this moment, she realized that this woman, Kalira, might be a minor scion. Her existence could undermine Daenerys' claims if enemies used her as a puppet. Alternatively, she might become a rallying symbol that splintered Targaryen support. On the other hand, she might add strength, forging alliances among Dornish lords who'd once revered Elia Martell and Prince Rhaegar. The prophecy was fluid. The game was complex. Finally, Laura let go of Kalira's wrist. "Gather your things," she ordered quietly. "We leave tonight." The woman stared in confusion. "To where?" "To a place you can choose your fate," Laura said. "If you remain, you will die. I was sent to do it, or another will. The only chance you have is to confront the queen in the east or find a place to hide more securely. But perhaps, if you truly have the blood, Daenerys will accept you. Or perhaps not. That is for the dragons to decide." Kalira gaped. "You came to kill me, and instead you're taking me away?" A slight smile ghosted across Laura's lips. "I was sent to do as I judge best. The many-faced god can wait, if that is his will. Now do as I say, or your life is forfeit." Without further argument, Kalira gathered a small satchel of clothes and a leather-bound journal. She snuffed the candles. Together, they slipped out of the tower, weaving past the dozing guards. Laura noted how untrained Kalira was at stealth, flinching at every wind-blown branch. But by fortune or skill, they escaped the keep and reached the place where Laura had left the sandsteed. Could not carry them both far. Laura silently cursed and took the reins, leading the horse on foot while Kalira stumbled beside her. When the first hints of dawn tinged the sky, they were far from the Weeping Tower, trudging along a rocky path. They found a place to rest beneath an overhang of sandstone. There, Laura gave Kalira water and some dried fruit. The woman's eyes burned with a swirl of emotions. She asked no questions, as if sensing Laura's tension was near boiling. After a moment, she spoke softly. "Thank you. I can't imagine what possessed you to do this." In truth, Laura could hardly explain it even to herself. She thought of the vow, the prophecy, the chance that this woman might matter. Or perhaps it was pity. Once, Laura had been a frightened child, stolen from slavers by a man who claimed to be her father. Now she was offering a woman similarly alone a path to possible freedom, or a path to a new kind of doom. The ambiguity gnawed at her, but she pushed it aside. "Don't thank me yet. Surviving what is to come will not be easy." As the sun rose, they continued west, planning to circle around to the northern roads leading out of Dorne. Laura had no illusions that traveling the length of Westeros to reach a ship for Essos would be safe or quick, especially in the midst of the realm's ongoing intrigues. But she had made her choice. The guild had entrusted her with the decision, and she would see it through. If the House of Black and White wanted to cull this branch, they would have to send another. Laura suspected they might indeed do so. Would she then become a target? The possibility chilled her. The face of mercy might turn on her if they believed she'd betrayed the vow. Yet, in her heart, she believed preserving this woman's life, at least until the meeting with Daenerys, was the correct path. Night fell, bringing a stark cold that contrasted sharply with the day's heat. They huddled together near a small fire. Kalira dozed fitfully, while Laura stood watch, her eyes scanning the darkness. Shapes moved in the shadows, perhaps coyotes, perhaps something worse. She was reminded of the old tales of direwolves far to the north, of shadowcats in the mountains. Something about the hush in the air made her uneasy. Then came a whisper of movement. Laura tensed. Out of the desert gloom emerged 3 figures in sand-colored cloaks, swords gleaming. They had approached with the stealth of trained hunters. Kalira stirred awake with a gasp. Laura rose smoothly, dagger in hand, positioning herself between Kalira and the intruders. "Be calm," one of them said, lifting a hand. He spoke the Dornish dialect. His voice carried a quiet authority. "We mean no harm unless forced. We come seeking Lady Kalira." Laura's pulse quickened. "And you are?" He tilted his head. "Friends, perhaps, or men sworn to a distant ally. We heard rumors that she intended to leave her keep. Our master believes she should remain in Dorne. Return with us, my lady, and you will be safe." Kalira said nothing, trembling behind Laura's shoulder. Laura's mind raced. These men were no mere bandits. Possibly they served a Dornish lord, perhaps someone with knowledge of Kalira's heritage. But were they acting to protect her or to control her? The vow hammered in Laura's mind. Preserve or cull. She could not let them forcibly take Kalira. "You have the advantage of us," Laura said, stepping forward. "We are but travelers. We prefer not to fight." "Nor do we," the man answered, though the glint in his eyes suggested otherwise. "But Lady Kalira belongs with those who can keep her hidden. The times are dangerous, and half the lords in Westeros would pay handsomely for her head. If she wanders off with a stranger, she courts death." Laura considered that he might be telling the truth, but she also sensed the tension in the men behind him, each poised to draw steel at a moment's notice. She glanced back at Kalira, who gave the faintest shake of her head, eyes pleading. That was enough. Laura turned back to the man. "Whatever your master promised her, she does not want it. She leaves freely. Step aside. The man sighed. There are 3 of us, stranger, and 1 of you. Even if you are skilled, we will prevail. Don't be a fool. Laura's lip curled. Perhaps your counting is off. In a blur of motion, she sprang forward. Her blade struck the first man's hand before he could fully raise his sword. He howled, dropping the weapon. She pivoted, parrying a strike from the second with a clang that echoed in the empty desert. The third lunged, expecting an easy kill, but Laura's reflexes were honed by years of training. She slid aside, driving her dagger into his ribcage. He staggered and collapsed with a choked grunt. Kalira cried out, stumbling backward. The man with the wounded hand scrambled for his dropped sword. Laura stepped on his wrist, pressing down hard. The second man, still reeling from her parry, slashed wildly, catching Laura's shoulder with a shallow cut. She hissed, ignoring the flare of pain, and drove her dagger upward into the space beneath his ribs. Blood spattered the sand. He sagged. The last man glared up at her, pinned. She's dead anyway if you take her. They will find her. He spat, eyes brimming with hatred. You speak of a master, but you are the servant of fear, Laura replied coldly, then hammered the pommel of her dagger against his temple. He crumpled. Perhaps he would live, perhaps not. She had no time to check. Kalira was trembling, tears streaming. Laura grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the bodies. Go. We must ride. More will come, Laura hissed. They fled into the night, leaving the small fire, the scorpion-infested desert, and the bodies behind. Kalira clung to Laura's waist as they managed to mount the sandsteed together, the poor animal straining under both riders. Laura hissed at the pain in her shoulder. She pressed a cloth to the wound, thankful it wasn't deep. Her mind churned with the realization that forces in Dorne wanted to keep Kalira under their thumb, presumably to manipulate her Targaryen claim. The contract at the House of Black and White might have come from an opposing faction, one that wanted her silenced. Meanwhile, Laura had chosen her own path, to guide Kalira eastward, possibly to Daenerys. The crosscurrents of power were fierce, but Laura was used to treading dangerous waters. In the days that followed, they navigated the winding passes of the Red Mountains, seeking the lesser-known routes to the Reach. Laura used stolen coin to buy a second horse in a small village, passing herself off as a traveling widow with her handmaid. Kalira did her best to remain quiet, swallowing her fear. On nights they camped by streams under star-filled skies. Laura saw glimpses of the woman's courage. Kalira asked about the faceless men, about Bravos, about the many-faced god. Laura answered sparingly, but found herself admiring Kalira's determination. Beneath her fear lay a soul searching for purpose. Eventually, they crossed into the Reach near the coast, aiming to find a ship that might carry them to Old Town or beyond. War rumors drifted everywhere. The lords were on edge, alliances shifting. Word had come that the undead roamed in the far north, though many dismissed these tales as fables. Laura knew better. She recalled the prophecy, the dream that said darkness would come. The time was drawing near. One evening, they reached a small fishing town by the sea, its docks battered by waves. Laura paid a local captain handsomely to ferry them to Lys, from which they could potentially book passage deeper into the east. The captain eyed them both with suspicion, but the weight of silver overcame his caution. The boat was little more than a creaking sloop, but it would have to suffice. As they prepared to sail, Kalira gripped Laura's arm. Should we not go to King's Landing? People there might need to know. No, Laura said sternly. You'd be a lamb among wolves. The Iron Throne is no friend to Targaryen pretenders, no matter who sits upon it at the moment. Kalira let out a shaky breath. Then Essos it is. The crossing to Lys was fraught with storms. The small sloop bucked wildly, forcing them to bail water to keep afloat. Laura's shoulder throbbed from her wound, reopened by the exertion. She bound it tightly, ignoring the sting. Kalira tried to help with the ropes, though she had no experience at sea. The captain cursed the gods, the weather, and presumably the bizarre pair of passengers who'd brought him such ill luck. At last, They sighted the Lys harbor through the fog of early morning. Laura breathed a silent prayer to the many-faced god that they would not be dashed upon the rocks. Once moored, she helped Kalira disembark, scanning the piers. Memories of her earlier time in Lys drifted through her mind. The stench of rotting fish, the labyrinth of narrow lanes, the opulent pleasure houses that attracted wealthy lords. If they lingered too long, they might attract attention from the Keeper of Ashes or others who recalled Laura's inquiries. But with careful disguises, they might slip away. She led Kalira to a discreet inn where the keeper, a bent old woman, seemed disinclined to ask questions. They took a cramped room. Only once they were behind closed doors did Laura let her guard down momentarily. Kalira collapsed onto the bed, rubbing her aching feet. Laura approached the window, gazing at the sea beyond. "We'll stay here a few days, gather supplies. Then we sail east. Our goal is Meereen, or wherever Daenerys Targaryen's forces are." Kalira nodded, though a flicker of worry lined her face. "And if she rejects me?" Laura exhaled. "Then you will decide if you can stand on your own. But at least you'll have the choice." Kalira bit her lip. "Why do you care, truly?" For a moment, Laura considered the question. She could offer a dozen lies. She could say it was the vow, that her order demanded this. But that wasn't the whole truth. Finally, she answered in a voice barely above a whisper. "Because I was once powerless, too. And because if you truly carry the dragon's blood, you might matter in the war to come. The House of Black and White, let's just say we see the world's deeper currents. If we are to face the darkness, every flicker of fire might be needed." Kalira's eyes gleamed with the faintest spark of hope. "Then we face it together?" Laura managed a small smile. "Until destiny chooses otherwise." They stayed in Lys longer than intended. Storms battered the coast, making passage east treacherous. Laura used her skill with disguises to move unnoticed through the markets, searching for a ship's captain daring enough to brave the route to Slaver's Bay. Coin was a problem. Her funds were running low. She considered taking a contract from the local underworld, but that would risk exposing Kalira if anything went awry. So she bartered, lied, cajoled. Time slipped by. Twice, Laura felt the presence of watchers following them at a distance. She never caught a clear glimpse, but the hairs on her neck prickled. She suspected agents of the Faceless men might be near, or perhaps enemies from Westeros, or allies of the Dornish men who had tried to reclaim Kalira. Danger seemed to coil around every corner. At last, she found a Sarnori trader's ship willing to sail to Meereen for a hefty fee. The voyage promised to be arduous, but Laura had no better options. She cut her hair short for a new disguise, giving herself a more androgynous look. Kalira donned simple garments and a headscarf, passing as Laura's younger brother. They boarded at midnight, slipping away from the Lys harbor under a sky streaked with moonlit clouds. Days turned to weeks on the summer sea, battered by winds that carried them off course. The trader's crew was a rough, superstitious lot. Some had never sailed so far east, but the promise of profit in Meereen was enough to keep them going. Kalira grew quiet, reflective. Laura worried she might break under the strain. Yet the woman persevered, each passing day fanning a flicker of resolve. In the final stretch, the sky turned an ominous gray, and the waters churned. The ship pitched violently. Crew shouted, trying to secure cargo. Laura clung to the railing, scanning the horizon. A faint shape emerged in the distance. A silhouette against the clouds, something monstrous. Was it a trick of light or a creature of myth? She blinked, heart pounding. Then, with a roar like thunder, a black shape soared overhead. A dragon, larger than any rumor had suggested. A thrill of awe and fear shot through Laura's veins. She caught a glimpse of horns, leathery wings, a barbed tail. Flames licked at the edges of its maw. The creature circled once, as if curious about the ship, then disappeared into the stormy clouds. Kalira, clinging at her side, gasped in mingled terror and wonder. It was real, Kalira breathed. A dragon. Yes. Laura's throat felt dry. Daenerys Targaryen's brood, presumably. They pressed on, and soon the battered walls of Meereen rose before them, the port bustling with newly built fortifications. The city had changed since Laura's last visit. More warlike, bristling with defenders. The statue of the Harpy lay shattered above the gates, replaced by Targaryen banners. The sight of it made Kalaira tremble. "So close," she whispered. "Will she see me?" Laura set her jaw. She, too, felt the swirl of uncertainty. She would have to use caution even approaching Daenerys's retinue. The queen was rumored to have capable advisors, some from Westeros, others from Essos. They might see Laura as a threat or an assassin, and they would be right. Yet Laura had come too far to stop. They disembarked in the chaos of the docks. Freedmen, mercenaries, sailors from across the known world crowded the piers. Laura's instincts shrieked at the potential for hidden dangers. She clutched Kalaira's hand, guiding her through the throng. If any recognized the silver-gold hair beneath Kalaira's scarf, they said nothing. The city teemed with life, from the wide streets near the gates to the cramped bazaars deeper within. Overhead, occasionally, the flap of giant wings and a burst of flame reminded everyone that dragons ruled the skies here. Laura used what remained of her coin to secure lodging in a modest inn near the central thoroughfare. She told the suspicious innkeeper they were travelers seeking the queen's justice. Meereen had hundreds of such seekers, so the story was believable. Then, she began making discreet inquiries, seeking a means to approach someone in the Targaryen court without raising alarms. Their chance came by night, 2 days after their arrival. A rumor spread that the queen would attend a public hearing of grievances in the plaza outside the Great Pyramid at midday. Laura knew it would be well guarded, but such gatherings sometimes allowed supplicants to plead for justice. If Kalaira could slip forward and remove her scarf, perhaps she might catch the queen's attention or that of her advisors. The risk, of course, was enormous. They approached the plaza under the blistering sun. A throng of hundreds formed a semicircle around a dais. Atop the dais stood Daenerys Targaryen, her hair a silver-gold waterfall down her back, dressed in practical robes of deep blue. The Unsullied stood guard in precise formation. Advisors clustered behind her. A tall man with a beard, perhaps Ser Barristan Selmy, Laura guessed. A younger man with Sellsword swagger, Dario Naharis, and others. A hush fell as petitioners approached one by one, voicing complaints of theft or seeking restitution for lost property. Laura's heart pounded. She glanced at Kalaira, whose face was white with nerves. "Now or never," Laura whispered. "Remember what we practiced." Kalaira nodded, swallowing hard. She stepped forward, weaving through the crowd until she stood behind the line of petitioners, waiting her turn. Laura lingered a bit off to the side, her dagger hidden, ready to intervene if needed. The sun beat down mercilessly. The smell of sweat and fear permeated the plaza. One by one, the petitioners were heard. At last, Kalaira stood before the dais, trembling. Daenerys's violet eyes fell upon her. The queen's expression was calm but curious. "Speak," she commanded. In a voice that cracked at first, Kalaira said, I come to offer service, if it pleases your grace. My name is Kalaira Waters of House Targaryen." A stunned murmur rippled through the crowd. She removed her scarf, revealing the pale hair. "I have traveled far, fleeing those who would kill me for my blood. I do not claim your throne, nor do I challenge your right to rule. I seek only to stand beside you, if you will have me." Silence. Then Daenerys spoke, quietly but with authority. "You claim to be of my house? Proof." Kalaira's cheeks colored. "I have only my face, my father's words." He was said to be the bastard son of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. Another murmur. The queen's advisors exchanged glances, uncertain. Ser Barristan studied Kalaira intently, his wise old eyes searching for some flicker of recognition or deception. The tension was thick as honey. From her vantage, Laura saw the Unsullied shift. At a gesture from Daenerys, they formed a ring around Kalaira, ensuring she could not flee. Kalaira looked terrified, but she stood tall. The queen descended a step from the dais, the midday sun glinting on her hair. Face to face with Kalira, she lifted a hand, almost caressing the younger woman's cheek. A hush fell. "You do have the look, child," Daenerys said at last, her voice gentle yet wary. "But many might have Valyrian features. True or false, you must understand. There are those who would use you to undermine my reign." Kalira's breath shuddered. "Use me or kill me, yes. I beg for your mercy, my queen. Put me to the test if you must. If you find me false, do as you will with my life." A chill gripped Laura. This was the moment. She had guided Kalira here, but the outcome was uncertain. If Daenerys judged her a threat, Kalira might die on the spot. Laura's vow required her to protect the Targaryen line that truly mattered. Perhaps Daenerys was that line. Perhaps Kalira was an irrelevance. She could not intervene without risking chaos. A moment later, Daenerys withdrew her hand. She beckoned to Ser Barristan, who leaned in to confer. At length, the queen nodded. She addressed Kalira loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "You will be taken into custody, well treated, until such time as we can determine the truth of your parentage. If you speak truly, you may yet have a place here. If you lie, you shall answer to me as queen." Kalira bowed her head, tears glistening. "Thank you, your grace." The Unsullied moved forward, escorting Kalira away from the dais. Laura watched, half in relief, half in fear. At least they had not executed her outright. Perhaps Daenerys saw some reflection of herself in this frightened young woman. The hearing continued, but Laura slipped away into the press of bodies, ignoring the curious stares. She wove through the crowd, ensuring she was not followed. Only when she reached a quiet corner of the bazaar did she permit herself a long exhale. She had done it. She had brought Kalira to the Dragon Queen, leaving her fate in Targaryen hands. The vow was honored in a way. If Kalira was truly destined to play a role in the prophecy, the queen would sense it or events would shape it so. If not, then she would be cast aside. Either way, Laura had done her part to preserve the possibility. Days passed. Laura kept a low profile, adopting the guise of a local fishmonger's wife, working at a stall to avoid suspicion. She gleaned snippets from the palace gossip. The new Targaryen arrival was being questioned by Daenerys' advisors, tested for knowledge of Targaryen history, observed for any sign of deception. She was not thrown in the dungeons but housed in modest quarters under guard. Some said the queen was intrigued by the possibility of finding lost kin. Others whispered that it was a scheme, that the girl might be working for the queen's enemies. Laura wished she could see Kalira, reassure her, but that was impossible without exposing both of them. Finally, Laura made a choice. The vow had been carried out to the best of her ability. Kalira was in safe hands, for now. Whether or not she thrived under Daenerys' rule was out of Laura's control. The House of Black and White would want a report, and Laura knew she could not vanish without delivering one. She sensed the time had come to return to Braavos. She managed to secure passage on a trading ship bound for Pentos, from which she could catch a ferry home. On her last night in Meereen, she stood on a balcony overlooking the city's mosaic of rooftops. The sky was streaked with violet as the sun set. In the distance, she could just make out the Great Pyramid's silhouette. Far above, a dragon's roar echoed, reminding the world that fire had returned. She felt a stirring in her heart, a sense of something monumental unfolding. The Targaryen line, once a dying ember, was now rekindled, scattered across the continents like sparks. Daenerys, Kalira, perhaps others. The House of Black and White had shaped this outcome. But why? Only time would tell if the prophecy would be fulfilled, if the darkness would indeed come, or if the world would be plunged into a new cycle of war. In the morning, she sailed. The journey home was calmer than her outward voyage, though the ghosts of the desert and the illusions of prophecy still haunted her dreams. When at last she arrived in Braavos, the city greeted her with familiar sights. The Titan, the labyrinthine canals, the bustling purple harbor. She wore yet another face, that of a traveling merchant, but as she stepped through the doors of the House of Black and White, she felt a sense of returning to herself, whatever that meant anymore. The kindly man awaited her in the Chamber of Masks, surrounded by statues of forgotten gods. She knelt, bowing her head. "I have returned." He lifted his hand in acknowledgement. "Rise, child." The subtle warmth in his tone was the closest he ever came to a greeting. "Your task in Dorne? Was it completed?" She chose her words carefully. "I found the girl. I decided she might serve the dream. I brought her to Daenerys Targaryen. If the queen judges her false, then the many-faced god will take her soon enough. If she is true, perhaps she will be needed." Silence hung between them like a drawn blade. The kindly man's expression flickered, unreadable. Then he inclined his head. "So you showed mercy?" "I made a judgment," Laura corrected gently. "Is that not what you commanded me to do?" His eyes glinted with an ancient wisdom. "Indeed, child. There are others in the guild who might have slit her throat. But you see the bigger tapestry. For now, we allow the Targaryen line to weave itself until the pattern is complete. That is the vow. Prophecies are precarious tools, but we do not shy from them. Death must serve life until the appointed hour." She bowed her head, a rush of relief washing through her. She had not disobeyed the vow after all. She had fulfilled the deeper purpose the House of Black and White concealed behind its grim facade. A twisted sense of gratitude filled her. She had been tested and she had prevailed. Whether the world would soon dissolve into flame and blood was another question. "I will rest, then await my next orders," Laura said quietly. The kindly man nodded. "Yes, rest, but be ready. The day may soon come when we must do more than simply preserve the Targaryens. A greater war is on the horizon. You have seen the signs. The dreamers are stirring. The many-faced god may yet call upon us to tip the scales." She inclined her head and backed away, leaving him to his reflections. Beyond those walls, Braavos shimmered in the twilight, a city of illusions and truths. Laura recalled how she had once been a frightened child, stolen from slavers, shaped into a servant of death. Now, she was part of something infinitely larger, an ancient conspiracy that safeguarded the seeds of a royal line for the sake of a prophecy older than the Iron Throne itself. The Faceless men, so feared across the world, were quietly ensuring that Targaryen blood endured, all to answer a call that might save the living from the dead or plunge the world into new cataclysms. As Laura climbed a winding staircase to a cell where she might finally sleep, she found a new clarity settling over her. She was an assassin, yes, but also a guardian in a dance of dragons. The memory of Kalira's frightened gaze haunted her, as did the silent majesty of Daenerys Targaryen, the flames of a dragon overhead. The pieces were in place for a grand conflict, one that would decide the fate of all. And the Faceless men would remain in the shadows, shaping each twist of destiny, preserving Targaryen blood for the final hour. For death was not an end. It was a doorway to what lay beyond. And in that doorway, the dream of fire still glowed, unquenched, waiting for its moment to blaze.